After I was injured, I began receiving text messages taunting me. I took myself to a local hospital, and the sports medicine doctor there told me to do this exercise where I was to hold a dumbbell in both hands and extend my arms out to the sides. But as soon as I did this exercise one time, it made my injuries worse. Luckily, the University of Washington has this website where they teach patients the correct exercises they need to do to recover from an injury of this type. The first thing they tell you is to keep your upper arm close to your body at all times until your injury heals completely. Their website is so good that not only was I able to recover from my injuries completely, but my work-related injuries improved. My left shoulder no longer dislocates, and even though my right shoulder is so torn that it still dislocates, I was able to reduce the pain of my acromial impingement, and I learned how to reset my shoulder every time it dislocates. And this made a huge improvement in my life. It took 2.5 years for me to recover, and I was stalked the entire time. My dogs were teased relentlessly. This neighbor kid would make barking sounds.
Fucking idiot. Yeah, let's make a noise.
One day my dog came running in from the yard with a puncture wound near her anus, and every time her heart beat, blood would spurt out, and it was obvious that an artery was severed. It cost me $3,000 to save her life, and the day I brought her home from the hospital, this neighbor kid came out with a bow and arrow, pointed it at my dog, and started laughing. And I began to realize that every time I was out in the backyard, that this noise was emitted that would hurt my dog's ears. This noise would continue all the way back until we were past the neighbor's garage. One day I was out there filming with my dogs, and this lady came out and she started beating her car mats over and over and over again. That mat 9 times until my dog started barking, and then she took out a camera and began filming them. They teased my dogs to get them to bark, and then they'd complain about it. I was still trying to sell my house, and one day during a showing I went down to the river with this couple, and someone had dumped more than a ton of broken brick all over my sandy shoreline. I tried putting up a sign offering a reward, and the sign was torn down repeatedly until one day it was just gone. One day I took a box outside to burn it, and when it burned down I found this camera lens in the ashes. And it was obvious that this camera had been planted in the corrugated liner of this box. Drones were being flown outside my bedroom windows at night, 4 feet above the ground. I I discovered this icon in my laptop where it was showing that a microphone was on, even though this laptop didn't come with any factory installed mic. And when I did a recovery, the device manager would show that there was unknown hardware installed on the computer. I found this shortcut for dog names, which evidently was a search for passwords I was using. And it got ugly. I found this file where they were describing breaking into my car, hitting my dogs with stun guns, and then sticking them with needles repeatedly while I was shopping at Walmart. I know this is true because I would come out of the store and my dogs would be frightened and shaking all over, and I would find blood droplets all over their fur with no obvious signs of injury. These people were torturing my dogs. And when my male dog was out in the backyard, this neighbor kid would come out firing his gun over and over and over again, and this frightened my dogs. And my male dog began to lash out at my other dogs, and they would take out cameras and film us. This teasing got so bad that eventually I had to stop using the back 2.5 acres of my property. My dogs could still use the front acreage of my yard in the summer, but in the winter when there was ice on the pond, I had to sequester them in this pen directly behind my house. And this beautiful section of my yard, which provided shade in the hot summer heat, could no longer be used by my dogs because of this constant abuse. To top it off, my house was being broken into repeatedly. I had DVRs to capture video from the cameras I had mounted around my house, and every time I came home, the data on these DVRs would be wiped completely. Eventually, I mounted the DVRs inside a safe, bolted the safe to the floor, and then I started catching these people creeping around my house. In this photo, this guy is creeping around my garage at night, and he appears to be carrying a hammer. In this clip, he's running away from my house wearing that same coat. In these photos, you can see where this car identical to mine is pulling into my garage. But this car has plates that are red, white, and blue, and the plates on my car were yellow, white, and blue. My dogs loved yogurt, and I would go to this local store and buy these frozen cherries and chop them up and mix them with yogurt, and this was something that we all loved. One day I had prepared some yogurt for us, and within about 20 minutes, it felt like someone had dumped acid down our throats. My gums were inflamed. My dogs' mouths were inflamed. We were vomiting, and we had bloody diarrhea. Our teeth would chatter relentlessly. This continued for 5 days. I took my dogs to 4 different vets, and every single one of them ignored the fact that my dogs had been poisoned. No treatment was given to counteract the poison.
I knew it was the cherries because I made a smoothie about a week later and I had the same symptoms. And I even saved my receipt of when I bought these cherries, hoping someone would investigate. But no one ever did.
One of the vets told me that my female dog was healthy, and because she was due for a rabies shot, he gave her the vaccination. And within 24 hours, she was at death's door. And when I took my dogs to yet another vet, he told me that my dogs were both in heart failure. My female dog died within a couple weeks. My other dog was put on heart failure medications, and he was doing so well that I thought he might actually live out his days, and I bought another puppy. And he would play with her and kiss her, and he loved her so much. One day I was shopping at Walmart, and this employee came up to me and he asked me how my dogs were doing. I had never had a conversation with this employee, and to my knowledge, he didn't even know that I had dogs. I had purchased puppy chow, and when I got home and fed this food to my dogs, by the following morning, both of them had bloody diarrhea. I stopped giving my dogs that dog chow immediately, and my puppy recovered completely. But my male dog began bleeding internally, and he bled to death within a week. When you love your dog, your dog will love you always. When you love your dog, he loves you every way and every day. And you love me this way when the day is long and gray. That's the way my dog loves me. He loves me every way. Will you love me this way when you're up against a wall? Will you love me like my dog, no matter what I say? When I'm looking like a hag, when our life's a drag, when it's bad and we're all hungry, baby, it's a heartache, and your heart breaks, and you're sad, and he loves me always. It's a hard way when your heart breaks, when the day is dead. He loves me always. He loves me always. He loves me always. He loves me Most people don't give their dogs cherries. Those poison cherries were meant for me. One day I was at Walmart buying aspirin, and this woman came up to me and she says, "You're gonna die." She was the wife of the man who had killed my dogs in 2002. When I got home and took 2 aspirin, they tasted rotten and I spit them out immediately, and I kind of laughed thinking, that was a lousy way to try to kill somebody. But they had poisoned all the food that I bought that day. Milk, nuts, whole wheat flour, coconut oil, noodles, and the meat that I bought for my dogs. About 3 hours after we ate, it felt like we were on fire and our kidneys shut down completely. I had studied herbology for more than 35 years and I knew how to treat kidney failure. But it took a few days to figure out how to counteract this caustic toxin. And it was costly. Car dealers use GPS to track their vehicles in case someone defaults on a loan, and when I bought an F-150, the car dealer shared this GPS data with the group who was tracking me. This wasn't just some disgruntled couple who lost their house on a short sale. They might have been involved, but there was a larger group behind this. The courts and prosecutors had covered up a beating. The medical board covered up the rape of a patient. A deputy covered up an explosion that burned me. They covered up the sadistic, mind-controlling behavior of this sick doctor for years. Local law enforcement covered up years of harassment and the murder of my dogs. And they did everything to eliminate me as a witness. I had been lobbying the federal government to change the law so that hospitals, insurance companies, doctors, and even KeyPro could no longer cover up medical mistakes. People have become disabled. Some people have died. Children have been born with cerebral palsy, and families have been stuck with hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills and disabled children because these doctors covered up a medical mistake while they all got rich. And that's wrong. The group poisoning my food was using sophisticated techniques to replace safety seals on milk products, coconut oil, and the supplements that I would buy. One day I left a jar of coconut oil on a warm stove, and when it melted I could see these pellets in the bottom of the jar. And when I fished one out and placed it in my hand, it burned through my skin in seconds. If someone presented to a hospital with burning pains in their stomach, they would be diagnosed with acid reflux disease or even cancer. One day I was at a water dispensing station and this truck pulled up shining its headlights in my eyes and the jug overflowed and my hand was burned. And you can see that the water in these jugs was bubbling. They contaminated face creams. They even went after my shampoo and conditioners, and my hair fell out and my skin was burned badly. This was unbelievable, and no one believed me. And this enabled this group to do this with impunity. In this video, you can see this man shadowing me as I shop at Walmart. In this clip, this man is taking notes of every product that I buy and that I don't buy, and he's not tracking anyone else. That's me in the white plaid coat. That man in the green was taking notes on me wherever I went through the store. When I realized this was happening, I began shopping 50 to 200 miles away from my home, and I was tracked for the entire year that the battery lasted in that car dealer's GPS. When the battery finally waned, I began to see off-duty cops and other men swarming around my truck trying to place another device. But by then I had mounted 5 cameras in my truck, and they were never successful because they were always in view of my cameras. When I bought a Garmin dash cam, it was not supposed to have GPS, but somehow they were able to modify the firmware to turn on the GPS features in that device, and for 3 months they were able to track me and poison my food, and I almost died. The Supreme Court wants you to believe that no one is being harmed by this tracking technology. But most of the people being targeted end up dead. When they could no longer track me, they began using this laptop that I sometimes took in my truck. They had hacked my broadband device and installed malware that would turn on my computer remotely and give this group my location anytime I was in range of Wi-Fi. You can hear Windows starting up when I pull into this Myers store parking lot. Luckily, I could remove the battery. When this group could no longer track me this way, they began searching my trash, my credit card bills, and they hit every health food store within a 200-mile radius of where I lived. I was exposed to this caustic toxin hundreds of times for more than 2 years. But when this poison failed to kill me, they switched to a different toxin. At first I thought it was lead because it made my arms and legs twitch and I wouldn't be able to sleep for days. But when a man was arrested in Michigan for spraying neurotoxins on foods there, I realized that they were using the same poison. Bromethylene. It's found in rat poison. It'll cause blindness, paralysis, aggression, fear, and relentless insomnia that will keep you awake for weeks. And when Prince and Michael Jackson suffered from relentless insomnia, pain, and neurological problems before they died, it made me wonder how big these organizations really were. Even Robin Williams had neurological problems and he couldn't sleep. And those are typical symptoms that bromethylene can cause. And there's no proof that Prince even knew he was taking fentanyl. Somehow they were able to spray this neurotoxin on the outside of these capsules. Here's a normal capsule. It's perfectly clear. But this capsule has something sprayed on it. Look at all that coating on there. And it's sticky to the touch. I bought 3 bottles of dandelion. 2 of them were normal, and in the 3rd one, the capsules were cloudy, sticky to the touch. And if you took one of these, you would be deathly ill within a matter of hours. If you go to a hospital with neurological symptoms, you will likely be diagnosed with ALS, MS, Parkinson's, or tardive dyskinesia. You will be given a host of dangerous drugs that will make your condition worse because you will never get treated for the true cause of your symptoms. There is no medical test to detect this toxin. That should tell you that someone with medical knowledge is advising this group on what toxins to use. Because when they want to take someone out, they want to get away with it.